Hey everyone, my name is Steve Shaw and this is my wife Michele. We're giving back and we like to talk to small business owners who are making an impact in the community. And today we have the pleasure of Amanda Jorgensen, superstar agent with Windermere. And Amanda, welcome to the show.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So Amanda, tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you local? Grown up here in Washington?
Yeah, I've been in Washington my whole life. I've been in Tacoma specifically since 1990 and in real estate with Windermere since 2007.
Wow.
So serving the Tacoma and surrounding communities.
Right on.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Go ahead. No.
All right. So what got you started in real estate?
Question I was going to ask.
That's a great question. Well, I had an experience purchasing my own home that wasn't great, and I didn't feel informed in the process or like I had the proper guidance going through it. And I had a history, like my background is in retail management. So I spent 17 years being in retail management, so customer service, organization, business management, all of those things. And so it seemed like a good fit to transfer over. It was a point in my career where I kind of topped out where I was ever going to be, working for someone else. And the idea of working for myself and that I controlled my own destiny and what I did for my clients would shine through. And I really got to be in charge of that.
Right on.
Good. Tell us.
So I always wanted to be a real estate agent because I loved going in and just showing houses. And so when you go in and show a house, one, I get to snoop around and see what the house looks like. You ever have one of those moments where it's like, man, I really want to show that house, or I want that house to sell so I could be the real estate, anything like that?
Yeah. So this is an interesting one. I remember years ago. This is one of my fun stories. Years ago, I had a house that was listed on my street, and I remember going in and just popping in. It's probably, 10 or 12 years ago. But I remember popping in and thinking, this is such a cool house. I'm like, I am going to sell this house. And because I loved it so much, it had all the original woodworking. It had pocket doors. It had been restored better than anything I'd ever seen restored to the original type of home for the craftsman. And so I met a great couple at an open house, and the house that I was at was a bit of a fixer. And when they were talking about the things that they wanted in a home, I'm like, I know the house for you. And I showed them the next day that house. They drove the neighborhood, and we wrote it up, and they lived in that house. The other cool thing about that house, the only inspection that I've ever been to that was so clean, the only thing the home inspector found with that property was that a doorknob was loose.
That's it?
Yeah, that was it.
That's
But it was
incredible.
such a cool house that I knew I was like, I'm going to sell this house, and I did.
So I have to tell you, so when I was out looking for a house, I was helping a friend, right? And so it's so funny how things just materialize because when you say it, it happens, right? So we went to this neighborhood and I'm like, man, I always wanted to live up in Ridgetop. It's so cool. There's all these, homes that are different and craftsman homes. And so we went to this one house and I'm like, that house is pretty good. But the next house on the corner, I said, man, if that house ever goes for sale, I'm buying it, right? So we put an offer in a house and it fell through and, your heart breaks. You're like, man, I really wanted that house. And so a year and a half later, my real estate agent, who was my friend, my best friend, she goes, I don't know if you guys are still looking for a house. She goes, but I've got a really cool house that I think you might like. And I'm like, oh, okay. And at the time, she had no idea, right? So we get in the car, we start driving, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're going to Ridgetop. And oh my gosh, we're turning. And I'm like, no. And you know how like the hair on the back of your skin? I was like, we pulled in the driveway and I looked at the house and it was the house on the corner that 2 years ago I said, oh, if that ever goes for sale, I'm buying it, right? And I said, that's it. I didn't even get out. I'm like, I'm buying it. So do you ever have clients who have that type of aha moment? Like, oh my gosh, this is where I wanted to be.
Not like that specifically. I know that there's some disappointment that happens if you don't get the first house that you want or your heart's set on something and then we go back to looking. I've never had a client that wished they'd had one of the other houses they didn't get. The one they get is always the best one and the one they're supposed to have. It feels interesting, like houses have energy,
Yeah.
and it's a nice match when you find the right place for your home.
That's awesome.
What is it about real estate that really gets you going? That really makes, because you did mention something, the fact that like you got into the business because you really weren't informed. And if you want to elaborate on that first, but
Well, first of all, real estate's never the same. You never know everything. You're always learning. So there's always some new challenges. You're like, wow, I've never seen this in all my years of real estate. So
that always seems to be a common refrain, let me tell you.
sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes not so much. But then how do you problem solve? How do you work through it? What does your experience mean and how you get through those situations? But also really knowing that you can make a difference. I have clients this week that there were a couple hiccups that happened outside of our control. For instance, the appraisal was scheduled to be in last Friday, and that was on a rush. And the appraisal didn't come in until Tuesday, and there's really almost no accountability for appraisers.
No.
And so we're a couple days late in closing, but in coordinating with the right team, with our escrow company, with our lender, who was amazing. The lender did such a good job getting docs out quickly once we got the appraisal in, and we were able to sort through all of that. And so they still, and we built in a 3-day buffer from the sale of their home. So they had 3 days to turn over possession to the buyer. And so they still will be able to move when we close today.
Oh,
and
nice.
And not have to find a place to live and not have a home for a few days. So like working through those solutions is a big deal. And the team that you have makes all the difference. Another lender probably wouldn't have been able to do it that quickly.
Nice.
So what is the state of the market today?
That's a really good question. It's interesting because oftentimes right now we hear buyers asking like, is it going to change? Should I wait for the pricing to go down? Are we going to see another crash? The difference between right now and 2007, from what I've done, or the research I have and the information I've gathered, is that sellers right now have more equity in their home. So people have not maxed out all of the equity and taken it out to make other purchases and done that. So there's equity in the market. The interest rates are very low.
Yeah.
So unfortunately with COVID, it's affected a lot of people in the service industry the most.
Right.
Typically, there are a lot more renters sometimes than homeowners. People who are employed still right now are able to purchase. We are still seeing multiple offers on almost every listing.
Wow.
I had a listing that I took live, and we had it under contract and sold within 3 weeks. We had 23 offers on that property.
Wow.
So it was a spreadsheet. It was for the sellers, and going through it, 8 that waived inspection, 3 that were cash offers. So then, how as a buyer do you compete in that market?
Right.
Right. So that there's some tricky processes and strategies that need to be taken on.
Yeah. And so, how is it so important to find the right real estate agent? Because there's 23 offers, right? So both if you're a buyer or if you're a seller, how do you walk your client through that?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think preparation in the beginning. So here's what we need to look for and what's the top of your price range, and knowing that and really taking people through data. Let's look at solds in that neighborhood and look at how much they're selling over asking price. What's the percentage? And looking at that so that they understand that, sometimes it's $20,000, $30,000 or more over asking. So now we're looking under their budget so that they have some flexibility. If they just are looking up to their budget, or they don't understand that houses are selling for more than asking, when it's time to make an offer, that would be a big shock. But if they have real life data and information ahead of time, that's good. And then talking about all the strategies and things that you can do to help them.
You just an interesting question is that when you said that people are doing $20,000-$30,000 above asking price.
I mean, I've seen them go 70 and more.
So what happens when the appraisal comes in at below that?
Yeah.
as always it seems to do.
Yeah, it depends. So there's a couple of things that you can do. So when you're making an offer, like depending on how high over asking price you're making an offer, you might use, we call it a 22 AD. It's an additional down payment in the event of a low appraisal.
Oh, wow.
So some people will have cash to bring to the table that would make their offer more attractive. Sometimes people don't have that or aren't willing to do that. So that's a whole different strategy that we do then. Totally get that. Now I forgot the question.
It was a question of
Low appraisal.
low appraisal, whereas a high asking
Yeah.
offer.
I mean, a lot of times they're appraising. I've only recently seen one low appraisal come in, but that's a negotiation then between the buyer and the seller. So sometimes the seller will bring down the price. Sometimes the buyer will bring extra cash to the table. Sometimes they meet in the middle. It's just that becomes another negotiation. Sometimes they can't come to terms, but I haven't had one where they weren't able to work through that.
Okay.
Do you ever go and get like maybe a second appraisal? Like maybe they just did it too low, or does that like
you can
frowned
challenge an
upon?
appraisal.
Oh, okay.
But you can't just go get another appraisal typically. And so, for instance, the one that came in low the last time, in fact, that was this week that we worked through. That one, the FHA appraisal, that stays with the property for 6 months.
Right.
So let's say seller decides that they don't want to work with the buyer on this, then they get another FHA buyer. They can't do anything more because that appraisal stays with the property.
Wow, that is crazy. So appraisers have some sort of power, actually, right? And, yeah.
Well, and conventional appraisers are a little bit more lenient typically. So as a seller, when you have the option of, multiple offers that you're reviewing, going through the process of like maybe it's not the highest price, but maybe it's conventional versus FHA or VA, and the different processes. So getting the right guidance on what that looks like.
Very good.
Who do you like working with, or when an offer comes in, does that make sense? Like it's a FHA or VA or USDA, right? Too for rural or
Well, USDA depends on location, and there's USDA guidelines for where the property is located. I mean, typically the cleanest, easiest financing is conventional. FHA, VA, they have restrictions about condition of the property. If there's any chipping paint, they might call out some different things that they want to have repaired at the last minute. Handrails, some different things that typically on the seller side, you've prepared your seller for those things too, though, and hopefully corrected those.
Okay. And also, you said that everyone's got equity, so no one's pulling out. Is that what you mean? No one's.
I
pulling
won't
out
say no
acting-
one's doing that, but I will say that less people are using the cash out of their home currently. People are. I think we learned a big fat lesson.
in 2008,
Right. Right. Oh my gosh.
Right.
So I have a question. So, what should you know about selling your home? If you're going to sell your home, what are some things tips that you could, give us about selling your home? Like, what do you have to do? Should you paint? Should you not paint? I mean, I go through this all the time. Like, should I? They're going to paint it anyway. So, I mean, what are some good tips that we could use?
Those are, again, really great questions. So what I would say to that is having your agent walk through the property with you, and they'll help you prioritize. It's easy to put a sign in the yard and a lockbox on the door, but prepping the seller and looking at, like, what does the entryway look like? That's the first impression of the home. And how do we make it feel great and inviting when someone's coming in? Does it need a freshen up? Sometimes I've gone into clients' homes where they are like, we're going to do this and this and this. And I'm like, nope, you actually don't need to in this case. Like, your house is great and this is going to appeal to the masses. And if somebody wants to make that change, great. But one of the other things that I notice is, depending on how long you plan to live in your home, people make a lot of choices that are very specific to them. So if you plan to live there forever, great. Make all the choices that are very specific to you. But I'm even available to my clients. Like, let's say you purchased your home last year and you're thinking about a kitchen remodel, but you're only going to live in your house for 7 years and you want to do something that's on trend or that is or not on trend that's maybe just more classic look that will weather those 7 years. I'm happy to go in and talk to my clients about like what makes sense later on for when you sell it.
Yeah, yeah. Like our house that we have, I didn't notice this, but as I was cleaning, and we've been in our house now for what, 10, 11 years, 12 years.
14 years.
Oh, goodness. Time flies, right? But at the bathroom floor, the tile is like an off white, and then there's a dark, not like, and then there's a brown. And the brown spells out, I love you.
Oh,
No, it's not. Oh, no.
I suppose I'd have to see it.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It's unique.
It's unique,
pretty
you know.
powerful.
So there's some rugs that cover that now in the bathroom, but I'm like, yeah, that's great, but no. So when you're saying unique, don't put I love you
On the floor.
spelt in tile.
I
on
would
the
say
floor.
not to do that if you're planning to sell ever.
What is the biggest bang for your buck to get if you're going to put your house up for market and something that would without spending a lot of money?
Well, without spending a lot of money is paint, but just in general, it's going to be kitchens and baths or give you the biggest return on value.
Sure.
But without spending a lot of money, fresh paint, neutral colors, and then those colors trends change a lot. Like right now, we're seeing a lot more white walls, but you can accent that with a lot of and make it super cool looking.
Absolutely.
Wow. So tell us about like your experience when, as I say, that got you into the real estate. You said you really weren't taken. They educate you, your agent. How did that?
Well, even when writing an offer, I remember. So back when I bought my house, we had carbon copy contracts, and so you had to read it, and it wasn't online. It wasn't electronic signatures.
Right.
But and I was 31, I think, when I bought my house, and I'd always been told that I needed to read everything that I signed, and I knew going into this that this is the biggest purchase of my life, and I felt like I need to read this. And so I was reading it, and I was asking questions of my agent, and she didn't know.
Oh.
So that gave me a lot of unease. As like, I don't know what to do if we don't know the answer. The main response was that if you don't like the house, you can get out of it after the inspection, which wasn't really what I wanted to hear as far as how I approached it. So the good news about that is I didn't get that first house that I offered on, but I got a way better house in a different neighborhood. And then the second go round, we sat down with her managing broker, and he was able to explain what the paperwork meant so that I had an understanding of that. So I find that a lot of my time with my clients, I like to spend time up front. So typically I'll do, an hour and a half consultation. We'll talk about lead-based paint. We'll talk about earnest money. We'll talk about what are the inspections you should get. How much do they cost? We'll talk about the different strategies, the state of the market, what that looks like. And then when we get to the offer point, it's a lot more comfortable, I think, because we've had that time and we're talking about all of those things through the process.
Sure. So that there's no guess points. There's no like, oh man, I wish we talked to a man about this, after they've already bought it or something like that. So.
Yeah. Or when you're, it's like, it's go time right now. There's not a lot of time to mess around. It used to be, years ago, you wanted to see a house, I'd be like, okay, Michelle, how's next Tuesday work at 3:00? Would you like to see the house then?
Right.
Now we're like, let's see it today or tomorrow, and when's the review date, and how much time do we have to make it ready? And people even then were like getting pre-approved sometimes after they saw the house.
Wow.
Now you absolutely need to be pre-approved with a great lender. Who your lender is makes a difference in your offer getting accepted. Who your agent is, how your agent writes the offer. I've gone through contracts, when you have 23 contracts and you're looking at them and people forget names and dates and boxes and addendums, whole addendums, sometimes they have forgotten to put in contracts. So you can see a lot about the agent's skill set and level of experience based on how they write an offer.
Right.
So when you say addendum, just for people who may not know what actually that means, when say they forgot a whole addendum.
That's just part of the contract, like the purchase and sale agreement. Then you have the, let's say the utility addendum. And that just says that the utility companies will be paid out of closing. And that protects the buyer. So because some of the utilities stay with the property
Right.
and are lienable with the property, and
Yep.
you don't want to be stuck with a big fat utility bill that somebody left you with. It's better to have it paid at escrow. But if you forget that addendum, then that doesn't happen.
Steve's mind is thinking like,
No, no. Well, I bought a house at auction, and there was a utility bill that came along with that. So,
I think you told me that story one time.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
no, that didn't go away. So, well, Amanda, and so tell us a little bit about. So you've been an agent now for what?
I think I'm in my 14th year.
14th year. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, have you ever thought about being you're with Windermere? Are you going to open up your own office or no?
No, I have been with Windermere the entire time, and I have a love for the support we get, the people that run our offices, the whole idea of doing the right thing for people
That's
and our
great.
clients. And the core values resonate with me as a person and as an agent, and the level of service that we offer
That's great.
is resonates with me.
Right.
And one of the reason why we kind of got you on, actually, Windermere you were doing some sort of like donation. You were you were very active in our group. We're all members of Ignite You in Lakewood, and it's a great organization to be a part of. But you were people were bringing clothing or to
We
the-
do, well, we do a lot of different things throughout the
Yeah.
year. So there's several different organizations and things that we do. So one of the things every year around the holidays is we do a food drive. So we take food and take it to the local food bank. And I want to say, oh goodness, I was on the board last year, and I think we brought in like 2,000 pounds of food. It was a lot. It was a
Wow.
huge pallet just overflowing and filled, as tall as we were high. So that was a great thing that we did and felt really good in the community. And then just partnering with those local businesses. But we also have the Windermere Foundation. So a portion of all of our commissions go to that.
nice.
And so when you're working with a Windermere agent, then we have the option of contributing above and beyond
Nice.
with any of our transactions or our sales. And then we give back, and then we interview and have a process where we're talking to different nonprofits in the community and finding out how we can support them and what we can do for them. And then quarterly, usually there's a charity that we also pick and we support them.
Excellent. Well,
So
Amanda,
before we leave, before we go, what do you do for fun?
Well, the next fun thing planned, the big thing is camping in a couple weeks. So I'm excited. I have a little camper. I'm going to
Nice.
tow it behind the Jeep and go out and hang out with some fun people and do some camping.
excellent. Good.
Yeah, thank you.
So how can people get in touch with you?
Oh gosh, I believe that my website and my phone number and email are swirling on the screen. So you're
Yep.
welcome to call, text, email, Facebook page. I have Amanda Jorgensen Realtor on Facebook. You can message me from there or reach out.
There you go. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. It was a pleasure. And just remember, Amanda Jorgensen, superstar agent out of Windermere and in Tacoma.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much, Amanda. Pleasure.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.